everyone, and welcome to the first office hour session of 2022. I'd like to welcome you all to this session, and I think that it's going to be a little bit different than the other ones. And I just know that because it's a new year, I'd like to wish everyone a very happy new year as well. A little bit about myself. My name is Shakib Rahman, and I'm an architect on the Oracle Apex team. And I'd like to begin by giving you a small recap of 2021. So let's get started. 2022 is already here, and it's a new year, and I feel like it's going to be a very big year. But first, let's just look at some of the highlights of last year. So in January, the Apex service launched, and this is the first time you could buy an Apex service on our cloud that's dedicated for Apex. In March 2021, something that I thought was really nice is the Apex community really came out in full force, and they wrote a ton of reviews on Gartner, and Gartner Peer Insights Customer Choice Award was awarded to Apex for low-code, enterprise low-code application platforms. In May 2021, we had Apex 21.1. That was a release that came out. In July as well, we released Apex as well as ORDS under the FUTC license. That means that you can download it without having to go through that click-through and agreeing to the terms. That way you can go and set up automations a little bit more easier. In August of 2021, we also launched the Apex Ideas app, which has been really popular with the Apex community. In September, Oracle published a low-code reference architecture. So if you wanted to build an application and see how, what like a reference architecture might be, or what the prescribed way of building different types of applications are, there's actually a section there for low-code application development, which is based exclusively on Oracle Apex. In October, we had our first Oracle Apex Africa conference. It was a virtual conference, and hopefully in the year ahead, it can even be an in-person conference. And in November, to round the year out, we had the Apex 21.2 release. That's just a few things just by month, but I also wanted to talk about a few other metrics here. So in 2021, we looked at the activity that happens on apex@oracle.com. Now, this environment is used by really anyone on the internet to go and try out Apex. It's our evaluation, environment. And you can go sign up for a workspace right now. It'll just take a few minutes and you'll be in and you can go and start using Apex. So over the course of 2021, we had provisioned over 33,000 workspaces, of which 24,000 are still active. And that's because we purge workspaces routinely. So if they're not being used, we will automatically, we'll notify you and then we'll purge those workspaces. If you look at the page activity, there's been over 50 million page events on that one instance of Apex with 24,000 active workspaces that were just provisioned last year. There's actually a whole lot more that are active today. If I look at office hours, we had 27 worldwide sessions. This is including the US timeframe office hours, which is this one right here. But there's also office hours in Arabic. There's office hours in Spanish and Portuguese. We have an Indian office hours, a Pakistan office hours, and we're going to be starting a new JPEG-centric office hours very soon as well. Of these office hour sessions, we had about 6,100 total live attendees and 57,000 views of the videos so far. In the Ideas app, since we launched it in August last year, we had over 560 ideas that have been submitted from members across 37 distinct countries. So it just goes to show you that Apex is really a global, it is a global platform that's used by people across the world. A small note here as well is the Apex team itself has been growing quite significantly. So we have added over 30 new hires to the team in just 2021 alone. We've practically doubled the size of the Apex development team. So that's just a brief recap of 2021. And I have a feeling that 2022 is going to be even better, even brighter, and even more of an impactful year for Apex. The next thing I want to talk about is some announcements and updates. The last office hour session we had was last year in December, and it's all about flows for Apex. And of course, you can watch the replay of this one and all the other sessions just by going to apex@oracle.com/office hours. The next office hours session will be next month on February 17th. And this will be really a continuation of the previous Vanity URL session delivered by Todd Butker, who is the PM director for on the Oracle database team. And he's going to talk about vanity URL extensions for Apex and ORDs on Autonomous Database. I believe that 2022 will also be the year where we'll see a return of some in-person conferences. I just want to bring two to note right now, and I'm sure there'll be many more that'll come up as the year progresses. One is Apex Alpe Adria, and the other is Kscope. So Apex Alpe Adria is going to happen in April, and then Kscope happening in June. With that being said, I also want to talk about the PatSet bundle. So our plan for PSCs with these PatSet bundles with Apex is to release them in a regular cadence, generally around 4 to 6 weeks or so. And this is going to include the latest bug fixes and other issues. So you can go and learn more about these. Go to apexoracle.com/known issues. The last PatSet bundle was released on December 7th. And the version, once you apply this, will be updated. The version of Apex will be updated to 21.2.1. I also want to make a note that if you have any ideas for Apex, you can go to apex.oracle.com/ideas and submit your ideas there. You can also vote for other ideas, and you can also contribute to the discussion. So if you see something that sounds like a good idea, you can go and add your thoughts. If you think there's an idea that isn't exactly quite what you'd like, share your thoughts, right? Add a comment. Let us know how we should go about that idea. It's really, really helpful for us. Now, for today's session, it's all about developer productivity. So it's a new year, and I kind of feel like a lot of people have New Year resolutions on, getting really good at something or becoming an expert at something or learning something new. So we thought, well, why not kick off the year with some developer tips that can really supercharge your productivity with Apex. So let's say you're using Apex and you want to learn how you can get around the Apex builder interface a little bit faster. Or maybe there's some things that were in your face, but you didn't really know about them. So I want to introduce as well, to deliver these tips, we've got 4 new members of the Apex development team that joined last year. And they're going to share some of the tips that they've learned throughout their journey with Apex and how you can be a more productive developer. Now, I'm sure that some of these tips you may already know, but I promise you that there will be something in there for everyone. So the first speaker that we have is going to be Alexis, and he's going to talk about a few tips, and then I'll pass it on to Neil, and then Paige, and then Stefan. So the first set of tips from Alexis will be focused on customizing your UI with some modifier classes, and also some simple lookup tables from the object browser. All right, with that being said, I'm going to pass it on to Alexis.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alexis. I joined the Apex team on August last year. Today, I'd like to share with you a few tips that may improve your productivity and make development a little easier. My first tip is custom UIs with modifier classes. So I will go ahead and share my screen. So now we have here an alert region, and we want to add a few modifications to style it a bit and make it look nicer. We're going to start with the buttons. We want these buttons to be a bit larger. So the first thought that is going to come to our mind is using the quick edition or the template modifications. So we can come here and click the button and select the size. In this case, it's going to be large. We will do the same with the no button. Size equal large. And now our buttons are a bit larger, but still, we want them to be bigger. This is not enough. So before jumping to custom CSS, we can take a look to the universal theme application, where we can see a few utility classes that allow us to modify our components in a different way. In this case, we want a layout modifier. So we are going to go to the width.
Hey, Alexis, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but the simple URL that people can use to get to this universal theme sample app is apex.oracle.com/UT. Just wanted to point that out.
Awesome. Yes, absolutely. That's always nice to keep it safe on your browser. So always going back to them. So now we go to the width, and we want the buttons to use the 40% of the available horizontal space. And if we see on the different descriptions, the one that fulfill our condition is this one. So we are going to, oh, sorry, this one. So we are going to go ahead and use that class. We go to that button specifically. And because we want both buttons to have the same size, we select both. And on the appearance on CSS classes, we could use W, 40, and P. So now our buttons are bigger. They are considerably bigger, but we still are not that happy. We want them to use the 40% of the screen until some point. After that point, we want the button to stop growing. If
So
we can
are you gonna write some custom CSS to do this now? Because like
I was going to do
that'd
it.
be the first thing, right?
Yes, exactly. It's like I was going to do that. It's like a max width CSS, or maybe create our own classes to be a bit cleaner. But why doing it if I can go to the universal theme, and now here we can use the MXW to set a max amount of width that a component can have, and after that it won't grow anymore. So in this case, I'm going to use this the max width. I'm going to set it to 160 because that is why I think it looks better. The increases are by 10, so you can select 170 or 70, but you cannot 175. So that's something to bear in mind. So now if I reload this, we can see that our buttons doesn't grow beyond our condition. And if we will make the screen smaller, it uses the 40%, it grows, but after some point it stops growing because we set the condition to set 160.
Hey, Alexis, can you show me how this is going to look on a mobile device then, like on a really small screen?
Yes, absolutely. So now we can set to an iPhone. Like this one is a small, the standard edition. So I think it looks like better now. We want the buttons to be a bit bigger, not only from the width, but we want the top and the button to be bigger, like the height. We can do this with adding padding to the buttons. So if we come back to the universal theme application and go to the utility classes under padding, we have a few classes that we can increase the padding on 8, 16, or 32 pixels, and even use modifiers for where you want to modify this, like to the right, to the left, or the top. On this case, I'm going to apply a round padding around the whole 4 corners of the element. So I'm going to add a medium padding. This is going to add 16 pixels of padding to the whole button. And if I reload, now the buttons are bigger. So now I'm happy with that. But I think there is something missing. I want to add an icon to these buttons. I'm going to add a happy face to the yes and a sad face for the no. So let me go to the no button. I go to icon and set to EFA frown for the sad icon and a smile for the happy icon. The template has to be on text with icon, so that's something not to forget.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And now we can have this. It's like, oh, it looks good, but we want this to be a more colorful. Maybe the green, the smile to be green, and the sad to be red. So before doing a styling on this with CSS, we can take a look to the colors, because Universal Theme provides us a few set of colors that we can use around our application. There is 45 here, and there are a few stateful colors so we can use around our warnings or success messages or buttons or icons. So we have a standard on this, and on this case I like this green for the icon. So I'm going to use the success text because the color of the icon depends on this one, and I cannot use the other one because the other one is for the backgrounds and the other one is for the border. So I'm going to pick up.
Would you apply this on the button itself or just the icon then?
No, exactly. That's a good thing to to take a look at, because when you are using utility classes, it's easily to get overwhelmed for the amount of places where we have CSS classes. So in this case, we need to be sure that we are applying to the exact place that we want. On this case is the icon. And I'm going to apply exactly to the icon because I don't want the whole text to be a different color. I only want the icon to be green and the SAT icon to be red. So now I save that and I have my icons from different color. And that's nice. You could even, if you want to change your buttons, you could even go and select one of these colors and select the background. This one is the one that it makes sense. And put it to any of your buttons. On this case, it will be over the CSS class. And you could add it there, and now your button is going to have that color. But we need to bear in mind the context, because if you select different colors and there's no high context between the content and the background, it will not only look not good, it will be an accessibility problem. So this is something to take a look at when you are modifying your colors with the utility classes.
Now, what if you want to make that icon bigger? Could you do that as well, like from here? Because there's not a template option to make that icon itself a little bit bigger.
Yes, absolutely. Now we could go to the icons, and there are modifiers there. So we could go to the smile and use the size. So you can say like, oh, I want the size, which is quite big. Let's set to this one.
All right.
And go to the icon and set this one to this.
I think you have two icon classes there now, Alexis.
Let me. Oh, yes, that's the. Let me only remove this part. I think that I need to use this one.
There you go. But you can just type in FA3X as well. So there's modifiers for more than just like the layout things. There's like icon modifiers, quite a few ways of customizing this.
So now it should be bigger, which is not doing it.
Our classes are probably overriding them. So maybe not try making the buttons a little bit bigger without a little bit of CSS, at least for
yes. Yes, probably I will have to take a look to that. But coming back to our example.
Suggestion.
So coming back to our example here, we want the text to be centered because we have the title here is centered, but this one is not. It's going to the left, and maybe we want to center everything, so to be more consistent. So we can go to our universal theme application and go to the content modifiers, where we have more useful classes, like the text for transformations and the style for the bold, underline. But on this case, we want to use the alignment. We are going to use the text center. So we can go, on this case, it's going to go on the region. This is the place where we are going to place the class. So on the appearance, we set the text to center. And now we have our text centered with this. And I think that I'm running out of time, so I'm going to speed up to the last example. That is going to be what happens if I want to hide this in relation to a change of size. If you go to the universal thing on the responsive classes, you can have a bit of morph control on your regions that they are going to appear or disappear in relation to a change of size. So that is something good to explore. So now if I run our example and I added that class, is going to be, it disappears there if I use in that class. And if I continue going down, I have another one. We say surprise, I am mobile friendly. So you can have another region that is going to be display if the size of the device is small enough, and the other window that, let's say, it wasn't tailored to be mobile friendly is going to be hidden if the size of our whole screen is not big enough. So I see that I don't have time for my next tip. So I'm going to, at least if there's another question, I can go back
just
to
a few quick questions in here that sort of came up. Like one comment was that you can do a spin of the icons. And so there's a lot of modifiers you can check out.
Yes.
Like all of them are on the Universal Theme sample app here. There's quite a few that you can go through and explore, and apply. So if you click on an icon, you can sort of see like what kind of animations you can apply. I'd just be careful when you apply them. I don't know about you, Alexis, but I generally don't like things spinning.
Absolutely.
Unless there's some need for it. But we do have this flash in here too, if you really want to show something off.
Yes.
The next tip you had, Alexis, I think we might have like 1 more minute if you can get into it. Like you want to talk about lookup tables, right?
Yes. Nice one. Sometimes when we are developing our application, we have our data model. We calculated that our columns, it was going to hold only 3 values for status, but suddenly a change of the requirements needs to hold more values. So in that case, it's quite common to use the pattern to have a lookup table where you can only store the ID, and you have the other table when you store the descriptions for those values. And we can enforce integrity on our database. So if we have a table, let's say like orders, and we have a column called order status, this column is a bar chart. So now we have the status, but if later we want more status, or the client can define their own status, this is not like the correct thing to have on our table. And maybe we want to transform that to use a lookup table. We could do it by hand, but Apex offers us on the browser a quick solution. We can click create lookup table. We select which column we want to transform. In this case, it's going to be order status. I click next. And it's going to create a table. We define the name of the sequence. And now you can either run the script, but depending how you are taking care of your project, maybe you are saving everything on your repository, you can copy the scripts on the button where Apex created the table, it creates the trigger to take care of the sequence, and actually get a distinct to get all the values and populate the lookup table, and after that insert the IDs for those tables, for those values, and the transform is completely. So now I can click create lookup table, and now we have our order status lookup. And if we see to the data, we can see the statuses.
That's
cancel
complete.
complete.
I didn't know that it had that.
Yes, yes, me too. Because when I took a look, it's like, oh well, this is really good to save time. And even as I said, it's not necessary to run it from here. You can copy the SQL and tailor to your standards. That's really good. So now if I go to orders and see the column is not there anymore, I have order status ID, and it took care to replace those values for the IDs on the lookup table. And that is my second tip. So if there's another question, I will come back for you, check it.
Cool. Hey, thanks so much, Alexis. There's just a couple of questions that popped up. One was, why would you want to use these Apex classes versus building your own classes?
I think it's sometimes about being a standard. You know, we have tested them, and you don't want to create your own classes on many different projects, and it's going to be difficult because if you create your own classes, you are going to maintain them. But in this case, we have been using these classes and they have been exposed, so you don't think so much about the maintainability of the CSS code. So you use it and you don't go so high code all your applications.
That's right. Yeah. I just add that, there's something that will stick around with Apex, like these utility classes. We work really hard to make sure that they're not gonna, be deprecated the next release, or if there will be, they will give you a lot of advance notice. So these are the supported ways of sort of customizing your UI. Awesome. Hey, thanks so much, Alexis. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Next up, we've got Neil, and he's going to talk about how you can teleport using Apex. So you can sort of move around Apex quite a bit. And then how you can do, use build options a little bit more to supercharge your development, kind of like really target different components in your Apex applications, and finally mastering the code editor. So I'll pass it on to you, Neil.
Hey everyone, yeah. So my name is Neil. I joined the team about 6 months ago, and I'm amazed at how quick it's grown in my short time being here, honestly. And I'm just really honored to work alongside these people. I've been working with Apex for about 6 years now, and I just want to share with you guys some tips I've learned along the way for efficiency and just to help your development process. So let me go ahead and share my screen. So my first tip I'm going to kick it off with is what is called Apex search, which is a spotlight style search. And to get to it, there is an icon up here on the top right. You see spotlight search. And for me, the hotkey for it is control quote. So typically I don't click it. So that's my first tip is use the hotkey to pull it up and try to use this as often as possible when navigating in Apex. So I'm going to, more so than explain the features of it, I'm going to use it to do the demo and explain as I'm jumping through the other things, how I'm using it to navigate. But the main thing I'll be using it for is navigating across my application. And so my first tip I want to show with using this is going to be the build options inside of Apex. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the build options. So I'm going to go ahead and drill down to a specific application. I want to go into my first app application here. So I pull it up. That's application 107. And then I'm gonna put a colon and I wanna go into the build options for that application. So colon is gonna let you drill down a layer. So there it is. And here's the first thing I wanna talk about is the new commented out build option. So when you install a new application, as of recently, you get this build option called commented out by default. And so the question is, what are build options? When do you use them? So build options allow you essentially an on-off toggle for functionality for components that is installed at runtime. And you can apply it to majority of the components in Apex. And I'm sure that the first question is, why use this over a server-side condition for if you want to like hide stuff, right? Because this is commented out, because that's very common way to go about it. So I'll go ahead and apply it and show the benefit of using this over like going server-side condition and what you get out of this versus that. So I'm going to go ahead and drill down to another application. I have a demo application here. So I'm going to pull up my spotlight. It's application 107. And I'm going to drill down into page, for me, it is 59. So let's start with this application. Page 59.
So if you're already in the app, I think you can just straight jump into a page, but you don't have page 59, right?
No, correct. So this is a demo app just so the new feature. So here's an existing app. So it's application 106. So 106, and in there I have page 59, which is my customer page, right? So I'll go ahead and run the page. And for demo purposes, I added some stuff that I want to get rid of. I want to comment it out. But I don't want to delete it because we don't know the repercussions if we do delete it. So this is more of a way to test out getting rid of certain components, maybe not a whole feature, but just certain components and seeing what happens. So I'm going to go ahead and use the spotlight search. So control quote, and I'm going to look for this region. So the name of it is unwanted region. So you can see here, I have region, unwanted region, and I hit enter and it brings me to it. So at the bottom, we have configuration, build options under the region settings here. So I'm going to go ahead and comment it out. So if I refresh my page, you can see that it's gone. Now, one thing I want to mention about the build options is that, unfortunately, this app has a page also called build options. So let's make sure that we actually go to the share components, right? So build options page, share components, there we go. One thing about the comment out build option is I set the status to exclude. So right now, when I apply it, everything that is associated with it will get excluded. You can see here, the associated component I did was unwanted region on page 59. So I'm going to go ahead and do this to another region. So here we go, page 50. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this page, remove that unwanted region you see up top. So again, unwanted region, build option.
So you're using Spotlight search like that, the Apex search to navigate in Page Designer as well, right? Not just like navigating to a different page.
Correct. So inside Page Designer, good thing to note is, yeah, so the Spotlight search is aware of where you are, whether you're at the app builder, you're inside of application. So when you're in the context of a page, you have the ability to search in this page.
So it's a region.
So for example, search page for that, it'll do a page search. So it's aware, which is super useful. So, all right. So I went ahead and applied that. I'm gonna go ahead and refresh my page. It's gone. Probably still wondering why not just use server-side conditions. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go back to the build options, share components, build options, enter, and go to comment it out. So let's say that we go ahead, we move this application to another environment, test it out, passes everything, and then we decide, you know what, we want to finally get rid of these components, which is a common scenario, right? You don't want to remove stuff right away. Sometimes you want to test out what happens, and then you decide to remove it. Well, under associated components, you have remove components. So this is one of the nice things. So it's not, I'm not removing a whole feature. I'm just removing certain components I want to get rid of, and that's when I'm using this. So once all set is, it's everything that's passed, I'm ready to get rid of them. Remove components. Yes, remove components. Are you sure? Absolutely. And now they're deleted from the application. So this is the most common way that I use this build option. And on that note, I do want to mention another popular build option that I see, which is dev only. So dev only, sometimes, did I add it in here? No, we'll go ahead and create it. So we'll create a build option. We'll call it dev only. We're going to include it because we're in development right now, but on export, we want to make sure we exclude it. So sometimes in development, there's going to be some debugging information, auditing information that you want to see, and you don't want to have to go run through looking at session state and other stuff to get that information. So for example, I'm in dev right now, and I have this ID and this row key showing up, but this definitely, I don't want making its way out to production. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go apply my dev only. So 59. Why not? Yeah, no, that's correct. Okay, customers. Yeah, there we go. Okay, there we go. I'm going to go ahead and use my Spotlight search and look for that dev only region, right? Region, it's called hidden items dev only. And right now it has no build option, it's being shown. So we definitely don't want that to make its way out. So I'll go ahead and apply the build option dev only. So now, when I refresh my screen, I have it set to include because we're in dev, so you see it. But if I export the application, when it imports into the next time, whenever you import it, it'll be excluded by default. So I'm going to move on to the next topic, but I'm going to leave this build option talk with pretty much everything that you need regarding build options. You should be able to just go to share components, build options, and the most of the information you need is right here inside of Apex. So don't really need to search the web. And then if you want to learn more, that link provides you everything you need. Last mention is that there is an API you can use to get and set build option statuses. You might have certain users which you want to be able to configure this inside the application. So it's pretty powerful. Okay, so my next topic is the code editor. So let me go ahead and drill down to, we'll start with, let's see, page 50. Let's find a process. Let's go to page 59. I think there's more processes there. That's fantastic. Here we go. Execute JavaScript code. Okay. So the code editor, whether it be JavaScript, PL SQL, now uses Monaco, which is the same thing that powers VS Code. So if you're familiar with VS Code, then a lot of the stuff that you would do in VS Code could translate to here. And the main thing here is the command palette. So I'm going to give a few tips on how to use the command palette. probably top 3 commands I use. And before even getting to the command palette, you may know this, but most common thing I use is commenting code out. And I've seen people in the past click at the beginning of the line, // if it's PL SQL --. Probably the most commonly used. So this is command for me on a Mac, command / will comment out the line. Or I comment out multiple lines. Now that I don't have to go to the command palette for that. So that's one of the most used ones for me. But if I do want to pull up the command palette on a Mac, I do Command Shift P here is my hotkey, right? You also have, where is it? Yes, so Command Shift P. Oh, there we go. And here is the command palette for Monaco. So it is extremely powerful, and you could take a lot of time learning these. So my recommendation is if you're trying to program and use the code editor and there's something you want to do, try to look at the command palette and see if you have something there already available to you. So one common thing that I'll see is uppercase, lowercase, formatting. People want to work on the formatting. Things aren't consistent. So inside of Monaco on this command palette, you can go ahead and first I'm gonna make my selection. I'm just select everything, Command A, pull up the command palette, and say I want to transform everything to uppercase. Great, super quick. Command palette, Command Shift P. I want to put everything to lowercase. Great, but there's one issue. The stuff inside of the quotes, I don't want that to be uppercase or lowercase. So there's other options here. So if I go to the command palette, you can see transform to lowercase, transform to uppercase. If I type in transform, you'll notice that there's some other options. So code case. Yeah. So so let's give that a try. So what just happened, right? So let's give it a try again and just notice what happens. Yeah, let's take a look, right? So right now everything is lowercase, right? So let's go ahead and run it. There we go. So,
oh, look at that.
Yeah, I must not ran it the first time. So it uppercased everything except for what was in the quotes, right? It left all that alone, which is probably pretty important. Some people may be referencing certain strings that they don't want all uppercased. So this is probably one of the more commonly used. So if you want to kind of just get a whole code block to be uniform, Command Shift P, transform code case, and voila. Because some people uppercase keywords, some people don't. It's a quick way to do that. Another one that I use commonly is you'll have blocks of code, and let's just say that this was a much bigger. It doesn't have to compile. That's fine. And say you had to run down here after something else happens. Some naturally highlight it, cut it, go down, paste it. Right. And even using the mouse in that whole process, it adds up after a while. So let's put it back to where it was. So what I typically do is I highlight what I want, right? And then I use the Option key on my Mac. So maybe
like Alt on Windows, maybe?
All on Windows, probably, yeah. And I hold it and I go down or up, and it'll move the block I have around. And I find that to be pretty powerful because sometimes when you do a copy and paste, the indentation gets messed up depending on where it goes into, and this maintains what it was before. So I think I'm running out of time here, but this wraps up my tips here for the code editor.
So really like commenting out the code, that's just like Command/ or Control/, right? Select a bunch of lines, Control/ and you got things commented out.
Right. So Command/ probably one of the most common for commenting out, and PL SQL, JavaScript, it works either way. And then, yeah, definitely just very useful to go ahead and pull up the command palette and try to see if there's something useful in here before you do it manually, and then try to force yourself to use it.
There's a few ways of doing this as well. Like it's not in that gear menu, but if you right click anywhere in the code editor, I believe there's a show command palette option as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that actually, because command palette you see here, F1 is a standard for, I think, for everybody. So yeah, so I know what it is. Mac specifically for me is Command Shift P, but definitely right click command palette if that doesn't work for you, and then find out what the hotkey is and what works on your system.
Great. Hey, thanks so much, Neil. Thanks for these tips.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so I'm going to pass it on now to Paige Hansen, and she's going to talk about how you can drive columns in SQL in REST data sources, and also how you can take shortcuts in Page Designer. So all yours, Paige.
Great, thanks, Shakib. Hey everyone, my name is Paige Hansen. I joined the Apex team last July and was pretty much new to Apex when I joined. So I've spent the last 6-ish months learning a ton. And one of my first tasks was putting together a hands-on lab showing how to build a movies watchlist application, which really taught me a lot about Apex, first of all, and showed me a couple new tips that I'm gonna then share with you today. If you're an experienced developer, maybe you already know these tips, but I found them very helpful as someone who was learning Apex. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I've imported an application that I actually downloaded from the end of Lab 3 of that same movies workshop. And I made a few changes for the purposes of this demo. The first tip that I want to focus on is creating derived columns in REST data sources to basically customize the data that you can access when developing your app. So as you can see, I have 2 REST data sources, popular movies and search movies. I'm going to be focusing on popular movies. And if I click on this source and go to my operations tab, I can test my operation to take a look at the data that I'm getting from this API call. So you can see that we get things like title, overview, popularity, and poster path. And what's important to note about poster path is that it only contains the unique path for a specific movie poster image and doesn't contain the full URL. So if we take a look at my runtime application, I'm using the poster path and backdrop path columns for my cards region that I've created in here. And as you can see, there are no images appearing. And this is because the poster path and backdrop path columns do not contain that full URL. So there are a couple ways of solving this problem. One way is to modify the cards region directly within Page Designer and add the URL, the first part of the URL, to the poster path. So I can do
Paige,
this.
where did you get that from, by the way, like that path?
Right, this is from the movie database API website. So they have that listed on there. So if I add this and run my page, save and run my page, then this will now,
Hey, there's a question here, by the way, while you're working on this, is where can you get that training material, or where can you find that movies lab? You can go to the Apex website and see it. I don't know if you want to pull it up for a short bit, but it's a new lab that we just published it like very recently. You can go to apex.oracle.com/HOLS for hands-on labs, or just go to the Apex website, click on the tutorials link, and you can grab it from there.
Right, yep. Yeah, the tutorial can be found on apex.oracle.com under the tutorials page. And so I can pull it up at the end. But yeah, if I add the first part of the link to the poster path, then I can get the actual image correctly. But this can be tedious, especially if the column is used in various places across the application, and also means that the poster path column is essentially useless without the rest of the URL. So a different way of solving this problem is by actually modifying the data profile of the popular movies REST source to create a column that contains the full poster path. So if I go into shared components and go back to my popular movies source, I can click on the data profile tab where I see that I have 13 visible columns. And I'll open the data profile window where I can view those columns that get returned from the movie database API. Here is where I can add a new column where I can concatenate the first part of the image URL with the poster path column. So I'm going to call this poster URL. I'll make it visible so that I can use it throughout my application. And within the source region is where I'm going to define what this data looks like. So I'm going to create a SQL expression. And here is where I'm going to concatenate the first portion of that URL with the poster path column. The data type automatically gets recognized. And now we've set up this new column. I can click create. And now I have that new column that I can access throughout my application. I'm also going to go ahead and just create one for my backdrop URL, doing the same process.
And you can use any SQL here, any SQL expression here.
Correct. So I could even use the concat function if I wanted to, instead of the double pipes to concatenate the two together. And I'm going to create one more column along with this that will combine my title with the release year. And I'm going to do this just because you often see the two of them together. And so I think that would be nice to have in our cards as well. So now I have my 3 new columns. To avoid confusion, I can also edit existing columns. And I'm going to make this poster path column not visible anymore, along with the backdrop path, because I no longer need those columns. I'll apply changes, and you can see that my columns have been updated to reflect those changes that I just made. So I have 16 total, 14 are visible since I hid the 2 path columns, and I have 3 derived columns, which are the 3 new columns that I created. So now I can go back to page 2 and click on my pop-up movie source. Into attributes, I can select my new title column, title year. I can also select my new poster URL column, and I can choose my backdrop URL column.
I noticed it said like invalid for the backdrop path because you no longer have it visible anymore. So that's kind of cool that it shows you that.
Exactly. So it lets you know. I'm going to save and run the page again. And now we see that our cards have been updated to show the backdrop image, the actual poster image, and the title of the movie with the year attached to it. So that kind of concludes my first demo of the deriving columns for your REST data sources, in your REST data sources.
2 minutes more, Paige.
What?
You've got just a few more minutes.
Absolutely. So I'll move on. The second tip I want to talk about is keyboard shortcuts. And this can be very helpful, especially for things like saving the page, saving and running the page. You may have noticed that when I saved and ran the page, I didn't actually move my mouse to the button and click on the button very much. This is because I used a keyboard shortcut instead. These shortcuts can be found underneath the help menu, and it pulls up this window where it has a pretty long list of shortcuts. So for the sake of this demo, I'm not going to touch on every one, just a few. Some of the shortcuts that I find the most helpful, like I said, was saving the page. So if I change the page mode to mobile dialog, I can save this page by using Option F7. If I change it back to normal, like I did earlier, I can save and run the page with Option F8. So those are 2 pretty simple ones that I use on a regular basis and can be very helpful. Along with that, you can use keyboard shortcuts to move around Page Designer. So these are often combined with Control/, which you can see appears in my bottom left corner. And then I can combine this with some letters to then navigate to a different tab in one of my panes. So if I do Control/A, for example, that switches me over to the Dynamic Actions tab. I can also do Control/EM. This will switch me here. I'll do Control/R to get me back to the rendering page. And if I have a region selected, I can use Control/EA to move over to attributes. So as you notice, a lot of these controls are representative of the associated tab. So A for actions, R for rendering, S for shared components. So that makes them a little easier to remember. And this control slash stays available until you either enter a command or you press escape. And then finally, I will demonstrate a couple more, which is control slash CP, which opens the create page window. And I can also use control slash CS for create shared component. If I want to create an application item, I can select application item, click next. It takes me to the create application item page. I'll just go ahead and create an item called user ID. When I click create application item, it returns me back to the page that I was editing. So I can continue to make changes here and use that application item that I just created. Like I said, there's a ton more shortcuts that you can use, and it does take a little bit of practice to memorize these and for them to become natural. But once you do get it down, it can help increase your productivity and make navigating a little bit easier. So if there are any additional questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, Shakib, it's back to you.
All right, thanks so much, Paige. So for everyone, the two shortcuts are option F7 for save and option F8 for save and run. And those two are going to save you a lot of time. All right, I'm going to pass it on to Stefan next, and he's going to talk about how you can build a single source of truth for component configuration. And, take it away, Stefan.
Thanks, Shakib. I'm Stefan, and I've been on the Apex team for about a year now. And today I want to share with you two productivity tips that have saved me countless development hours in the past, and a couple of smaller tips and tricks sprinkled in there. So the first, as Shakib put it, is the single source of truth for component customizations. And in less fancy terms, that's just using the initialization JavaScript code attribute wherever applicable, for example, in the interactive grid, and then centralizing this code, perhaps in a static application or workspace file, which makes it much more reusable and more easily maintainable. After I'll demo this, I will show you for my second productivity tip how you can leverage the Apex dictionary to kind of check whether you really have standardized all of the, in this example, interactive grids in your application. So what do we have here? Just a regular application, couple pages, some interactive grids. For example, on this page, there are two interactive grids, and these are highly customizable components, right? You can have a look here at the amount of attributes and settings. If you go the JavaScript route, there's even more things you can configure. But say you wish to customize it. Say you wish on page load for this first row to never be selected. Well, there is a declarative option for it, right? You can turn this off and it will not select it on page load. But say you have a huge application with 50 or 100 interactive grids, as simple as toggling this off is, you probably don't want to go in and do it manually for each interactive grid. And most likely there will be more than one attributes you want to customize. So as simple as Apex makes it to customize one or two or three components, it still takes lots of time to standardize a large number of components, right?
Especially across pages, right? Because here you can just select both regions,
exactly. So this is easy, of course, when you multi-select, but across pages, it's still a tiny bit difficult at the moment. So my proposed solution is to leverage this JavaScript initialization code. And it does take a little bit of JavaScript know-how to know what option you have to set here and what option corresponds to what declarative option. But for that, I always take a look at the JavaScript API reference. By the way, there's an awesome little shortcut for it. Here it is. And if I wish to toggle this off programmatically and then overwrite this declarative option, I would probably go to interactive grid, maybe search for something like initial, oh, there it is, initial selection. And we already have a little snippet of code that we can copy paste in here. So although this attribute is turned on in here, it will get overwritten by the snippet of JavaScript. We run the page and we see that for the first interactive grid, the first row is not selected. And for the second, it is selected. So far, it looks more difficult to actually go in and write code as opposed to toggling off a declarative attribute. But I will show you that it does make sense once you have more components to take care of. And the way I deal with this, because also you don't want to copy paste this code for each component, right? You probably want to just have it in one place and just reference one function call perhaps in here. So what I usually do is go under static application files. I create myself a global script file. I usually call it something like script.js. Click create. And because it will go, I want it to go application wide. I would do something like declare a global namespace, maybe my app, and have this be an object. And in our case, we only have this one function. Let's call it perhaps standardize IG, and it's a function that takes the initial interactive grid options and does something with them. So let me copy paste from here. So same as before, except now this code goes in a file. I'm going to save my changes. Let's copy this reference and place it now in a somewhere where it affects the entire application and not a single page. And the place to go is under user interfaces. And you want to scroll down and look for JavaScript file URLs. Just paste that in there and apply your changes. Going back to the page, let's make sure that that namespace and that function already exists and is loaded properly. So let's say my app. Oh, perfect. That's standardize IG. Okay, so that's on the page. It means we can now also use it in here instead of this. So you could do something like this. Remove this line right here and just pass in the options, something like that. That would work. But because of the functional nature of JavaScript, it's even simpler to do something like this. Just have just the declaration of your function, and Apex behind the scenes will call it with the appropriate parameters. All right, let's also do the same for this one. Paste it in here, run the page, and now both interactive grids should behave the same way. And they do. So now you just have this one file that you have to maintain, right? And the changes will get propagated nicely to all interactive grids in your application. So that was my first tip, which ties me into my second tip, the Apex dictionary views, because say you think you made this change to all of your components, but have you really? And you probably don't wish to check every single page and every single component to see if you've made this change. Well, that's when the Apex dictionary views come in handy, and you'll find them under this menu, Workspace Utilities, Application Express Views. And what these are, they are views on top of the base tables where Apex stores all of the metadata about your page items, applications, everything in your workspace. So if I wish to check whether I really applied that JavaScript code to all of my interactive grids, and you see how many views there are here, right? So nobody knows them all by heart, but I would probably search something like grid. I have a feeling this would give me a good hint about which view I should take. And even the first one looks good. So Apex Apple Page IGs, interactive grid definitions. So that looks promising. Let's move over to a SQL commands here and just check what this view contains. And let's actually make everything lowercase because I do not like uppercase SQL. So let's run this. And another tip, you can run a SQL query or a piece of PL SQL by highlighting it and hitting Control Enter. And that's Control Enter on both Mac and Windows. All right, so we see lots of information here, but what are we really interested in? We want to see that JavaScript code, right? So let's look for initialization. No, there's nothing for initialization. What about Java? Oh, perfect, JavaScript code. So this view contains that information as well. Which columns exactly do we need? Let's go
application ID, page ID.
Exactly. Page ID, probably.
The region name, maybe.
Exactly, region name, and this JavaScript code. Let's run this. Looks good. Of course, there's more applications. So you could leverage this to quickly and easily analyze such a situation, or you could actually build this into a report that you can always reference back to. So in my case, I will build such a report in the actual application. You could probably have another application that takes care of these things, or have it in the application but exclude it via the build option or what have you. And let's call this page something like standards dashboard. That kind of shows the health of our application, or is a custom advisor. So just a basic page. And even on this page, let's create an interactive grid. Interactive grid, let's call it IG init.js. Let's base it on a SQL query and paste in our query here. But we probably wish to restrict the result set just for the current application. So app, page ID, and exclude probably the current page from the result set. And page ID does not equal, app ID, app page ID. Let's see. That looks good. So let's run this page. And indeed, the two interactive grids on page 1 are standardized, but I forgot about this one apparently on page 2. And what you could probably do is make this report a bit more interesting to look at. And what I like to do is apply highlights. Let's say JS missing is the name of this highlight, and it will go on the JavaScript code column. It will have some serious red background, and the condition is JavaScript code is empty. Let's see what happens now. That looks good. Let's collapse this and save our report. So now you can go to this page and kind of see whether there's any issues. You would probably have multiple such reports based on these dictionary views. And clearly, there is a problem on page 2. So let's go to page 2. And indeed, we have an interactive grid here that was not standardized. Let's standardize it. Click Save. Refresh this page. And we see no red. All is good. So these are my tips. Again, to reiterate, do use the initialization JavaScript code attribute, and do centralize it, perhaps in a static application file. And then you can leverage the Apex dictionary views to ensure that you've actually standardized all of your components. That's it for me. Back to you, Shakib.
Awesome. Hey, thanks so much, Stefan. A lot of questions coming in. There's been like a lot of lively chat as well. So I want to thank everyone for attending today's office hours. Sorry for running a few minutes late. We're 6 minutes over, but I certainly learned a lot. And I think that there's some good tips in here that you can use yourself on your development projects. As always, you can view the recording of the session on apex.oracle.com/office hours. You can watch all the recordings of the previous sessions as well. Thank you again for everyone for attending this office hours, and we'll see you all next time.